In this video, we will be looking at why you should not be doing prop drilling and you should be using React context instead. So I know this is a very basic topic, but I see a lot of people still doing prop drilling, and I think it's about time I should make a video on use context hook. It's a pretty simple and pretty useful hook, and if you learn how to use it, it's going to make things a lot easier for you. So I'm going to use a method of diagrams in this video. So if you don't want to see diagrams and simply see how to use context hook, I will have the timestamps. You can simply scroll through the timestamp and go to the part, or even check that in the description below. Now we are inside XLEDraw, so I'm going to try to show you why a prop drilling is bad in my opinion. So I'm just going to have this main component right here. I'm going to call it component A, I guess. Let's have this bigger text. Perfect. Now I'm going to replicate this component and have like more of them. So let's have, okay, all right. So I'm just going to paste them here, right, like this. All right. Now we are going to have arrows which show how the state is moving. So for that, I want to show that we are having a state here. So I'm going to have a small font and I'm going to say a is equal to 10. This is not the state syntax in React, but just consider that this is a state, and we are trying to pass this down to all of those components, and you will see why things make sense here. So let me try to draw an arrow if it works. Yeah, so we are passing in a to all of these components. I'm just going to leave it component A. You just need to assume that these are all different components, but what's happening here is we are passing A from the top component to the bottom component, and the tree is going onto two ways. So what's happening here is the component A is including this one, and okay, you know what, let's just rename this components. I'm just going to do that. Okay, so what's happening here is that component A is passing a value to component B, which is A, and component B is passing it to C. Why is it passing it to C? Because C needs access to A. And why is E getting it? Because E needs access to A. Now what's the problem here? It's like it works. So there is a thing in coding, like if it works, don't touch it. Yeah, it works, but why is it bad in my opinion? Because if component C wants the value of A, it needs to go through component B, and component B needs to pass it to component C, and all of these needs to have the props for which accept A, and which is very bad in my opinion, because we are just using component B, which is a middle component, just to pass in A. So if component B has some other operation, it's still going to pass A, but still not going to use the state A inside component B. So even if the middle components don't have any use of it, they still need to pass it down, and I just don't like it. I don't think this is the best way to do it. And now we are going to see how React context solve this issue. So instead of this A is equal to 10 being here, if we had this as a context, so I'm just going to say that this is a context. So perfect. Now what can happen here is that if you want to use this value, instead of doing prop drilling, I'm going to remove these arrows. We don't need to do prop drilling. Hold on. Okay, I just need to remove them manually. So the only arrows we need here is this. Actually, you know what, we don't even need arrows. So for component E to be able to access A is equal to 10, we can simply call a context call. We can directly access it from component A, and if component B wants access to A, we can do the same thing. So it can directly access A. Same with component C, it can directly access A. I know this diagram might be sounding a little too confusing, but the gist here is that every component will have access to A as long as the component A is having all of these as children. So if you wrap the context around your main file, which is layout.tsx in your Next.js application, you can basically access your context from any application, any component. So if you have a component deep under the tree, you can still use the context without using prop drilling, and you can still access the context value which you had set. So we are going to see why use context is much more easier than prop drilling. So yeah, let's get started. Okay, so quickly, this is an example of prop drilling. So we have this main component called as app, and we have set a state which needs to be accessed only by component 3, and it needs to be the child of component 2 and component 1. So we, since it's the child of these two components, we cannot directly call component 3 from the app component. So if component 3 wants to access the value of A from the state here, we need to pass in it as a prop. And since we cannot directly pass it to component 3 without using context, we need to pass it as props to component 1, which passes it to component 2, which finally passes it to component 3 and it just prints it out. You see what's happening here? It's just that you need to pass in all the props. Like for example, in component 2 we are getting A and we are doing nothing with it instead of just passing it to component 3. Like there is no use of A inside of component 2, and this is the only reason why we are using use context hook in this video and fixing this thing. Okay, now let's work with context. So how do we start? First of all, we need to wrap our app around a provider. So our main file is main.jsx because we are using Vite here and not Next.js, and you can have your provider here. But what I want to do is, since we are going to create a state inside for our context, we need to create a new file here called as providers.tsx. So I'm going to call it provider.tsx, and actually it's JavaScript. I keep forgetting that this is JSX, so this should be JSX instead. If you are using TypeScript, feel free to do so, but we are using JavaScript. Taking some time to save this. I don't know why. I have no idea why. Okay, now we can say RFC and make a React component, and now we are going to name it providers, and now we can create a context here. So I'm going to create a new context here because we are going to need to export it. That's why we are going to create it here. So export const number context is equal to create context, and it's imported from React, and we can just leave this empty, and you can have default value, but I'm just going to leave it empty for now. And then what we are going to do is we are going to create a new state here. So let's say const a set a is equal to use state, and the initial value will be 10. Perfect. Now what we are going to do, we are not going to return a div. Instead we are going to have children here. We are going to, because we are going to pass in all the JSX children through our provider, so we are going to create a new context, actually number context dot provider, and we are going to set the value, and we are going to pass in an object here. We are going to pass in a, and we are going to pass in set a. Perfect. And now we are just going to pass in the children. So this is our providers file, and we have the first provider set up here. So what we can do in main.jsx, we can simply pass in our app under our providers. So providers, let's pass in app. Perfect. Now our app is by sure wrapped under the provider, and our app is enclosed under the number context provider. Perfect. Now we get the access to a and set a, so we are going to see how that works. We can go to main.jsx file, actually app.jsx file. Now we can remove the state, we don't need it anymore, and we can say const context is equal to use context, and we are going to pass in the number context here, which we exported last time. Perfect. And now we can destructure it. I hope it gives something here. No, I'm pretty sure it doesn't. So we get a and set a here. We do not need set a at all because we are definitely not using it. Now what we can do is remove all the prop drilling here. We will only render it in component 3. So I'm just going to remove it from everywhere, even from the props, because it's not being used. Perfect. And even here, you know what, let's remove this. We need this statement here actually in the component 3. So in app we are just rendering component 1, and then we are rendering component 2, and then we are rendering component 3, and in component 3 we are accessing the context and we are directly printing it out. So let's see if this works or not. So let's go back here, let's refresh the page, and it's not working. Let's look at the code. Let's go to main.tsx. Let's go to providers. Yep, we do not have usestate imported, and this is the problem of using JavaScript. It does not show you errors. So yeah, I'm so used to TypeScript. Yeah, now if we go ahead, you will see 10 here. We can simply change this to like some 15 or something, just to show you that I'm not cheating here. Set it to 15. Yeah, it's automatically 15. If we go back to our app.jsx file, you can see that we are not passing it a as a prop anywhere. Instead, we are using component 3, which is deep down inside the tree, and we are directly getting the context there, and we are directly getting a. So I think like whatever crucial information about your web application, like user state or something like that, what you're going to do is you can create a new context and you can wrap it around like as a provider, and then you can just use context hook to get the value. But the important thing is that it should be wrapped. Your entire piece of code which needs to access your context needs to be wrapped around the provider. If you don't have you don't wrap it around provider, you will not get the value. So that's how it works. And you can of course use the setA function, which will also update the state here, but we are not going to do that in the tutorial. So yeah, this is a brief explanation of how state management tools work. Of course, there are a lot of different complicated things there, but This is just the basics. So if you don't want to use a state management library, this is how you can probably get things done. Lastly, I wanted to show you how use context works in React server components, specifically in Next.js. So I have this article by Maxi Ferreira. I will have that article in the description. The reason I'm not showing this in the video because it's not related to RSC, but I just wanted to have the notes here. It's not really related about use context, but it had a cool point. Like even if your entire app is using server components, if you have a provider here and if you have these threads like news articles are all server components and you need to access your context, you can simply create a new client component under your news article and have it use the context, and that totally works even though your server components do not have access to your context. So yeah, that's pretty cool thing I wanted to tell you in this video. So I will leave the article in the description below because I want to credit the person who created the content about this. So yeah, that's it. For this video. If you found value in this video, make sure you click the like button, hit the subscribe button, and share this with your friends so that they enjoy the same level of knowledge you are enjoying right now. I know this is a very beginner video, but I think it was necessary, and because I'm going to also create longer builds, I wanted to make all of these concepts clear, and I could simply link these videos on that big video. So yeah, that's the game plan. So yeah, if you have any suggestions, make sure you leave them in the comments below. I'll make sure to attend them and see whether the tutorial can be made or not. And yeah, that's it for this video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.